I want to start this talk off and give some credit. This talk happened, or began, I should say. Daniel said something at the beginning of this conference that we're going to start with the end in the beginning. Now, this talk, we're at the end, but I'm going to take you to the beginning of us. Not just art, but of us. We begin before art comes. But where this talk began was on the beach of Masada, 5:30 in the morning. Me and the guy with the black shirt in the back of the room went to see the sunrise. And we had a very interesting conversation. We then sat down for 5.5 hours in Playa Masada, and we had a talk about how culture is in front of economics and politics. It went into other places, but the things that Youssef said to me kind of resonated. So when Michael asked me to come and do a talk this year, this talk was actually stimulated from a guy who pissed me off on Instagram. And it was just a couple of days ago where I did a live IG, and I wanted to prove to him that he was incorrect about the things he was saying. For those of you who don't know, that's the Trevi Fountain in Rome. And what the gist of this talk is, I want you to focus in on. If you're going to take a picture of anything, this is the most important part of the talk. How light, water, and magnetism actually show up in culture, show up in art, show up in every single thing in your life. To show you, this is also from artwork in Rome. These are pictures on the left of nature, and you see what the ancients did. They're codified in the columns. So I want you to take a look at what I said on the top. Anybody here 24 years old? Have you ever done anything like that? That's Michelangelo's Pieta. It's also in Florence. It's a spectacular example of the reflection of what was going on in Michelangelo's life at that time. So, this is another sculptor. I put this in for Fen. This is very close to where we are now. That is the Grand Hotel, Mexico City. But I want you to look at the quote that was made at the Age of Light. For those of you who weren't there, the last Palestra event. The writing's on the wall. I'm going to tell you every single talk that was given here, the writing was on the wall. But I'm going to tell you, very few people can read. I don't think we're seeing the whole story. So my supposition to you is, why is this artwork becoming rare in the last 120 years on this planet, coming from us? Well, I'm going to give you a supposition here. I think that humans are behaving like a cancer on the surface of this planet. And I believe that is being reflected actually in our art and our culture. The reason why I believe that has to do with the first pillar of health. How do we use and abuse light? We heard Dimitri say a little while ago that we can go through walls and we can find out where you are. But he also made a comment that I vehemently disagree with. He said that technology can't hurt us. Well, I've got a lot of members in here that could probably give him a lot of blogs to tell him that he's wrong about that. But the point that I want to make to you is that I'm going to make the case that this is actually true. So, for those of you who believe in evolution, for those of you who believe in God, I've got some bad news for both of you. You're both wrong. And I'm going to show to you that you're wrong. This right here is a Neanderthal skull. Nobody, including any preacher, any Muslim cleric, can ever argue with you that that's a Neanderthal skull. And it was cratered out of the earth. Does anybody know anything about the Neanderthals? Why they got their name? Neanderthals is a valley in Germany. It's at the 51st latitude. There's never been a Neanderthal skeleton found above the 51st latitude. Anybody want to take a guess why? Has to do with light. has to do with water, and it has to do with magnetism. So, how do we know the brain of the Neanderthal and us has been changed over time? Well, we know the size of the skulls. The human brain was changed by light. So, the creationists in this room will be very happy because they'll say, Genesis 1:1 to 1:15, gotcha. And the evolutionists will go, well, what about Darwin? I'll have more to say on that a little bit later. So, this slide shows how everybody who's on the evolution side look. They believe that we came from chimps. The people who are creationists, this makes them sick to their stomach. They're like, no, I believe Adam and Eve and that whole story. But the one thing that both of them don't realize is the primate brain quadrupled in 6 million years. That's irrefutable from the fossil evidence. Why? Because we've pulled the skulls, not the whole skeleton, but the skulls out of the ground. Now, here's the shocker. We have a trend in all of the Homo species that everything gets bigger, 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 until we come to us. What if I was to tell you that Fenn, Rick Rubin, P. Diddy, anybody who's an artist in this room, the only reason why you're creative is because we've undergone a cognitive de-evolution. Our brains have shrunk. 125 grams of brain tissue we've lost. Now, one of the things that you may not know if you're not familiar with my work, we have semiconductors made inside of us. What is that main semiconductor? The two big ones? Melanin and water. Melanin, I think most of you know from the skin. People who know about Parkinson's disease know that you lose dopamine in your brain. Well, here's the interesting part. Melanin degrades into dopamine. So as we lost the melanin in the 125 grams, what did this mean for people like Fenn? What did it mean for the other artists like Michelangelo? Actually meant that they became more creative. So art and culture is actually a brain damaged primate. So if you don't believe me, you saw my benevolent angel. This is the original cryptography of humans. That's Sumerian. The interesting thing is you take a look at the wall, the picture up there. The picture on the right is made in the Renaissance with the sun. The picture on the left, the horse here, this is what we see on the walls of Neanderthal caves 65,000 years ago. Do you know that it's the first time that artwork ever showed up anywhere in human history was in the caves where Neanderthals and Homo sapien skulls were found? That should make you realize something, that our brains shrunk, but we got the ability to speak and to create art at the same time in history. So we normally think bigger is better, don't we? At least the people in Texas do. I think Andrew said that from the stage just the other day, that you have to be a Texan, you know that. But here's the crazy thing. People don't like physics. And it turns out in physics, anything that gets smaller gets more powerful. So this should raise the question in all of your heads, how did we get speech? How did we get artwork? How did we get this building? How did we get the building across the street? How do we have the culture? As Yusef likes to say, there's a monster on the surface eating all the culture up. In other words, we have an atavism going on. Well, it turns out this is part of my brain surgery story. Right here, this area, most of my members know, you'll see you have melanin and dopamine. You'll see the precursor chemical dopa. So as you break melanin down, guess what happens? You create more dopamine. What happens if that process continues longer? That's where mental disease happens. In fact, there's a lot of other diseases like that. That's the reason people like porn. It's the reason why people eat too much. It's the reason why people use drugs. It's why people like Metallica. It's actually the reason Metallica is Metallica. And it's the reason why Rick Rubin, my friend, produces Metallica. Okay? The Story is a book that I gave Youssef and the president a year ago, right there. How did I figure all this out? The monk who sold his Ferrari, a fable. And what was the key metrics up there? Take a look at it. You see what's in yellow. Melanin's there. What's the big part of the story that nobody in this room, besides my members, know? This one. That big thing on the back is the spectrum of the sun. Notice for 4.6 billion years, this is for evolutionists, even creationists. All the other light is man's light. When did that light start? 1893, when we electrified the planet with Tesla's AC current. Now, where did all those experiments begin? In Michael Faraday's lab in the 1840s and 50s. So we are talking 150 to 170 years ago. So, what does this mean for brain surgery without a scalpel? It means that we got better abilities. What happened relatively in the brain? Is the brain shrunk? On a relative basis, there was more water in the brain than anything else. What else happened? The melanin was still sitting there. So, this fountain could never be created by a Neanderthal brain. The best that we have is the paintings that are in the caves. Why did I bring up the 51st latitude? What happened at the 51st latitude? For the Europeans in the room, is it 95 degrees like it is here in El Salvador right now in Central Europe at the 51st latitude? No, it's pretty damn cold, isn't it? Even in August. So guess what Neanderthals had to do? They had to come in from outside, as the allegory of the cave says, and they get into the caves. What did they start wearing? Things on their skin. What else did they start to do? They started the first artificial light experiment. It's called fire. And they used fire at night when they weren't supposed to use it. And what did those two things do? Shrunk their brain. That was the result. That's the first artificial light. And their solar panel, which is their skin, for those in the audience who are not brain surgeons, your skin and your brain come from the same circle of cells in an embryo. It's called the neuroectoderm. They're exactly the same. So I'm going to tell you that the Trevi Fountain right here, you look at it, I want you to look at the background, all these houses from 17th, 18th century, but look at that fountain. Why is that fountain really, really important? Because you know it's in Rome. It's the seat of the Roman Empire. Culture. How much do you really know about that fountain? It's the same thing going on with that fountain tied to our brain. I'm going to tell you it's true. The Roman Empire in the first century built a house right here. This is where 11 aqueducts all came together and dumped in the middle of Rome. And when they built these houses there, it's called the House of Water below it. If you've ever been to Rome, most Americans look at the thing, take a picture, and they walk away. Stop and go underneath the ground, like I did. You'll begin to realize something that the Roman Empire realized. When you control water, you can make a great civilization. And that's exactly what happened to them. Water was the key to them building the culture and all the other things that they did. So the exact same thing that happened to us 65,000 years ago actually happened 2,000, 2,500 years ago in modern Rome. And the result is still there. That fountain was made in 1767. That's not that old. So, how does all this link? You may be shocked to hear this. Stars, when they create, the stars that you learn about in Genesis, the one that was over Jesus, or the one that's up in any galaxy right now, what do they emit when they form? Water. Did you know that? What happens when water is impacted by light? Anybody want to make a guess? It changes its refractive index. Why is that important? Turns out when you're able to change your refractive index, that is the ability of a semiconductor. Semiconductor is really important. What happens when you marry two semiconductors together? Melanin and water. For those in the audience who don't believe that melanin's a semiconductor, NASA just put it up on the International Space Center 2 years ago to study it. Crazier thing, we don't know the atomic structure of melanin. You know why? Because we use X-rays to examine it. Turns out one of melanin's amazing abilities, it absorbs all frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, from RF all the way up to cosmic rays. So we can never know the magics that are in nature, even with my benevolent angels ZK proofs. And I've written about this in a blog, which you can see there. So as our brain shrunk, melanin degraded, created dopamine, water increased, human culture shows up. The Trevi Fountain is a reflection of the semiconductors of the people in 1767 who built that. The crazy part of this story is if you ever go to the Trevi Fountain, right over here, there's a barber shop. He put a big urn up there because the barber in 1767 thought this looked like shit. So he put the urn there to block the barber from complaining during the construction. So that guy, the barber, he was a low dopamine guy. Why? Because he was in the barber shop all the time cutting people's hair. He wasn't outside in the fountain. So culture reflects the changes that happen in us. What most of you don't know yet, all 5 of your senses, human senses, including the sixth one that you may not know you have, which is the mitochondria itself, between you and the environment is a melanin sheet. Every sense, eyes, smell, taste, hearing, doesn't matter. If that melanin degrades, your ability to perceive the art changes. So guess what that means? The artist creates for himself. If the audience likes it, what does that mean? That means that their melanin sheets are intact. When you see something you don't like a Rothko, in other words, you're not identifying with the early 20th century, when things were dark, when people were inside. So, this is the Victus Caprius at the base of the Trevi Fountain. This is a picture that I took. These are out of the 11 aqueducts, these are the 3 aqueducts left that still flow to that very place. That water is spring water that comes from what? Volcanism. Are we in El Salvador, Herbert? Yes. We have lots of water here. Yusuf, when I was in the basement with you and your brother last year, you told me that your brother has this coffee plantation, and everybody told him not to buy it, right? And what did I tell him? Nah, I don't know. He said there was no water in the base of the coffee plantation. I said, well, I have a funny feeling, looking at the topography of El Salvador, if you dig a little further, you're going to find water, and it's probably going to be deuterium depleted. So for those of you who don't know, President Bukele now has a coffee called Bean of Fire. Guess a year ago, this happened. And I told him, dig deeper. And Yusuf kept saying to me, do you think we really have deuterium depleted water? I said, well, look, the Romans have it and Iceland has it. Iceland has more groundwater than any place in the world. I said, the last time I checked, El Salvador's got a lot of volcanoes, but I don't think you have the technology to go deep enough. And I think if you do, you'll have enough water to feed everybody in Central America. And it turns out I got word that President Bukele found water under the place that everybody told him there was no water. So this story is ancient. All of you have seen the pictures of the Roman aqueducts. Do you know that 2,000 years later, they're still in operation? What's the branch of physics that they operate on? Gravity. And you can see the middle picture right there shows you how it happens. So it turns out water was the key to the greatness, the building of the Roman Empire. How did it get so vast? Without the centralization of water, this was a problem. In us, the same thing was the case. We needed to have more water and more melanin in our brain to become human. And guess what the interesting part of the story is? This doesn't break the rules of Genesis. I tell all my religious friends this. I'm not offending your opinions at all. He said, let there be light. But you know what he didn't tell you? What the recipe was. And that's kind of what I'm trying to tell you right now. So at the end of the line of the aqueducts, it contributed to human flourishing. But what did it do? This is the thing that Michael always posts all the time on Twitter. There's beauty. We see beauty when we have water and melanin come together. I don't see Mark here, but Mark was here yesterday, and he said that AI doesn't have a target. And you heard my answer. The target is melanin. The AI is the children that you have. They are going to be the future Fens, the future Davises, the future people that are going to work on these tech rails that AI and algorithms are building, on the tech rails that Sam's going to help build here in El Salvador. We're the AI. And for those of you who think that's crazy, just remember, if you listen to my podcast, the 8-hour podcast I do with Andrew Huberman and Rick Rubin, what did I tell you right after the Cambrian explosion? The cephalopod, which is what Huberman studies, kicks his melanin out to protect himself, and his brain emits all kinds of light that you can see. Anybody who's seen an octopus in a place knows that. Guess what we do? We retain all the light and we keep all the melanin inside. That's the difference. 650 million years apart. That's the innovation that's been going on this whole time. And it cannot happen without water and without melanin. So, I've heard in this conference 7 times, 3 by him, 2 by Curtis, the story of Darwin. You may not even know. Take a look when this was published. February 5th, 2024. Now, even centralized science is beginning to come around that genes are not the big deal. So here's the real big offense. I mentioned Kevin McKiernan to you guys earlier. He's a geneticist that worked on the Human Genome Project when Clinton was in the White House. Here's a very, very interesting thing. Everybody assumed that the human genome would have 100,000 genes in it and that chimps and monkeys would have probably 20, 30,000. What did it turn out? In 1996, we found out that humans have 23,200 genes. For those in the audience, that's 3.2 billion base pairs. Everybody found this shocking. So what was the next thing that happened? We did the chimpanzee genome project. Then we did the great ape project. Guess what we found? Chimps and gorillas have 3.8 billion base pairs. And great apes have 1 more chromosome than us. That means they have more genes than us. But I think all of you would agree that we're a little bit more complex than apes and chimps, right? You want to hear the craziest part? The great apes, of which the chimps are from, have 24 pairs of chromosomes. Everybody in this room, I'm assuming nobody has Turner syndrome or Klinefelter's, you all have 23. You know what the difference between the great apes and us is? Their 24th chromosome got stuck by their telomeres and condensed down. Do you know what it became in us? Chromosome number 2. Anybody want to guess what's on chromosome number 2? The gene called POMC. You know what it makes? Alpha, beta, and gamma melanin. How do you like that? Pretty shocking, huh? So, I told you that light, water, and magnetism were the key to understanding where culture begins. That's where it comes from. There was no culture, no art prior to the Neanderthals. We had 6 generations of Homo before that. There was no artwork anywhere in the history of our species. So when you know better, you begin to do better. So I want you to think about the implications of this. But I'm not done with you yet. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. That was the point that I tried to make to Fen yesterday. That people who look at your artwork, people who look at Yusuf's country, don't see it for what it is because their melanin in their sensory systems aren't the same. That's why Curtis can get up here and call it a monarchy, because that is a perspective from San Francisco where you're getting irradiated like a fucking idiot. Okay? I heard our boy Andrew here. He said something yesterday that resonated with me. Patri patriae. Right? George Washington. And podcast, do you know what I've called Nayib Bukele? George Washington on steroids. Why? Because he's done more for his people than even George Washington did. And that's the truth. So I want you to realize, the more we embrace technology, and why is this a story for all of you to hear? Most of you who heard my talk last year, I think, know this. But look at the slide on the bottom right. The more you use tech, your brain gets worse and worse and worse. That is where chronic disease comes from. That's how I was able to get Nicole Shanahan to give me $100 million. $5 million was given to somebody you guys know, Amgen, and he created the first blue light computer. $20 million went to Francisco Gonzalez Lima, who's doing a study on red light therapy and autism. Why? Now I'm going to tell you what autism is. It's an atavistic effect. Do you know what that means? That means in evolutionary times, we go backwards. So we're silly talking monkeys. What is a kid with autism? He doesn't talk. He's like a monkey. Because the problem is, the way in this declines, the melanin goes down. When I told Nicole that story, she was pissed off at me. But then I told her, how about if I write you a blog about it? And I did. I wrote Quantum Engineering 45. And that's when she said, okay, I'm going to give Amgen $5 million. For those of you in the room that don't know this, Nicole's ex-husband is Sergey Brin, who runs Google. They have a baby daughter, Echo. She got autism. This changed everything about Nicole. She went from being a swinging left-wing liberal to like a mama bear. She wanted to know why this happened. The story that you never get told, you know that Sergey Brin and all of his friends, the VCs, tried to block Amgen's device to come to market? Do you know why? Because when he lowers your dopamine level, you create more freaks that don't know if they're girls or boys. They get pins through their nose. That's how you do it. And you think this is hyperbole. Do I have all the studies to back this up? Oh, yeah, I do. I do. I'm that guy. Hate to tell you. So we need to be smart with how we do it. I'm not saying we can't use it. We just got to be smart. So let's bring to the modern world. So my friend from South Africa, remember I told you I was going to show you a picture. See that bunny right there? The owner of the New York Mets bought that bunny for $45 million. That bunny is made out of stainless steel, highly polished. That defines a shitcoin. Artwork today is a shitcoin. Why? Because it's devoid of what makes us. What Andrew said, there's a power inside of us that needs to come out. What I'm saying to you, the power in us is being degraded. Our batteries are being degraded. And we don't realize it because our five senses are losing the melanin as we go. This piece of shit on the bottom is a new artwork that's in Boston. They said it doesn't look like a big dick, but I think it does. And I'm just going to tell you, this is in a public space. You want to know what we're doing? We're preconditioning other low dopamine people with this kind of stuff. So Mark's not here, but this is really for you guys. Here's my real problem with AI. Read the quote. I'll read it for you if you can't see it. If the neural pathways that control social and imaginative responses aren't developed in early childhood, it is difficult to revive them later. A whole generation could grow up without the mental ability to create their own fun, devise their own games, and enjoy real friendships. All because of endless screen time. I'm going to tell all of you, every screen besides Amgen emits blue light. What does blue light do? What's the damaging effect? It lowers dopamine and melatonin. That's what causes the major problems. Technology to an excess is a problem. So, can you see these effects everywhere in the world? So that picture right there, you see beautiful architecture, correct? This looks like a modern vagina. These are both supposed to be places of worship. This is absolute garbage. I'm sure somebody in the audience thinks this is beautiful. And if you tell me that, I'm going to know that you're low dopamine. That you're probably as pale as all get out. You probably live in Finland or Minnesota. This picture here was done by Liechtenstein. This is millions of dollars this painting goes for. 1963. This is right when Intel started taking the revolution over. We don't even make pictures of the sun. Any of you remember the Beijing Olympics? They had to put a picture of the sun on a fucking board. Why? Same reason I'm telling you here. Don't believe me? Look at the bottom. It's even happening in our branding. If you go outside, when Michael didn't get the coffee, that's what stimulated me to put that picture in there. This used to be the logo. That was with higher dopamine people. Now in Seattle, they're dopes. They're at the 45th latitude. So let's make this easier for them. It's even in our advertising. Remember, culture, not just art. It's everything. It's everywhere. But remember what that first slide said. Do you see it? I submit to you, if you don't see it, it's because your dopamine level, your melanin levels aren't optimized. This picture here, it's on buildings. I was in Prague. I was a speaker at Bitcoin Prague. That picture was taken with the two Vikings that I did the podcast with that my members know about. This is what cities should look like when we're vital. We have the power in us, and we reflect that in our artwork, and we're proud to show it. We want people to see it. I don't want anybody to come and see this. This is all the things that, El Salvador put in El Encanto that I'm trying to get rid of. This is absolute bullshit. But look at this. We even decorated doorknobs. That is what you find in the United States now. The evidence is irrefutable. It's everywhere you look. Now, to put the whipped cream and cherry on top of this shit sundae. These flowers, Dave, pay attention. These flowers are from El Salvador. These are bougainvilleas. Everybody knows that. That's a canela. This is a magnolia. This is from New Orleans. These are from a family called plumeria. What may you not know? Most of these flowers look relatively simple when you look at them. You know when they evolved? Take a look at that slide. They evolved when CO2 started dropping in the environment. But you have all the idiots from the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization tell us that we're going to fucking die. CO2, it's a problem. That's where we are today. We're close to death. Bill Gates, dermatologist, and ophthalmologist know this. That's the reason they want to block you from the sun, because what you don't know is when you're in the sun, actually oxygen and CO2 rise. Don't believe me? That's Mother Nature's decentralized network right there. Photosynthesis and mitochondrial respiration. You don't even see it. Look when we evolved. Look at what the levels were. 1,000 parts per million of CO2. And we're worried about 420. You are being lied to by the shitcoiners that have American dollars and euros. And they're in the BIS. They're in Washington, D.C. Governor Newsom, Kamala Harris. All of them are full of shit. And guess what? We need to speak out. Just as our artwork speaks out. In El Salvador, we need to speak loudly. We need to fill the room with discontent. My friend Andrew, he was spectacular. Didn't agree with everything he said, but when he got emotional on the stage, I was like, bro, you're my brother from another mother. And that's the truth. We need to do that as a country. What the Bukele family is doing is they're building an ark. And they're looking for the right animals. Some of you are the right animals and some of you aren't. Some of you think you are, but you're not. Some of you go, shit, I need to get here. You do. We need you to build shit. We got plenty of, Bukele's party is called New Ideas. We got plenty of those. Now we need to execute the ideas. We need to rebuild the economy. We need to make El Salvador great again. Why? Because El Salvador is the beacon that's going to fix the nightmare that's across the border called the United States. You heard what I said to Curtis. I totally disagree with him. If he was right, Malay should be taken out. He only got 53% of the vote. No, the problem is us. We're the cancer. We're the ones that adopted the technology. And we allowed corporations to abuse it and hurt us through our dopamine level. And the reason FEN got canceled in Belgium is because most of the people that are there at high latitudes, they have lower dopamine levels than we do here. So to make this really personal, you met my benevolent angel. Little bit autistic, a lot ADHD. He let me tell you guys this. I told Sam if he got his ass out of Toronto and came to El Salvador, that his insomnia would go away and he wouldn't use Adderall anymore. Sam, was Uncle Jack right or wrong?
Right on both counts.
So Dave, let me ask you a question. Is Sam cheaper for the government now that he can sleep and he's not taking drugs? Because we had this conversation about a year ago, almost to the day. And I said, Dave, I'm telling you there's another way. We need to get rid of the Mayo Clinic idea. This idea. Now I brought you a silly talking monkey who's one of yours. And now he's becoming mine. And what does that tell you? Sam is the artificial intelligence that I want to do. I'm okay with Mark. I'm okay with Dimitri. Build your rails. But I need to teach the people here how to use it wisely. And realize we have 13 north latitude sun. If you think that I'm picking on Sam, Yusuf knows I've gotten on his ass about this more than you can imagine. He's too white for me. The day he got married, I got on his brother's case. I got him these fancy glasses. You know what he told me? They're not fancy enough. He goes, I'm too cool to wear glasses that are blue blockers at night. I said, bro, just so you know, the president changed every light bulb to incandescent when Yusuf got married. And in Spanish, he gave a nice convocation, told all his friends and family that, hey, I found out that blue light's bad. Jack brought all these things to my house and all these machines, and he goes, now I know why I can't sleep. The same thing that I did for Sam is the same thing I'm doing here. You know what the difference is? Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they didn't ask Jack Kruse's opinion. Nayib Bukele did. And that started with you guys that were at Palestra last year. You saw how that went down. So, this effect is seen in our children. I think everybody in this room cares about their kids. Look at this quote. All of you are interested. I heard Millerman talk today, Michael, eloquently. I told him a story about those first 10 pages. Yusuf doesn't know this, but Yusuf said to me on the beach, we want you to write this law. Jack Mallers took 2 or 3 days to do the Bitcoin law for the constitutional amendment. He goes, we know yours is going to take longer. Yusuf, did I not tell you in 5.5 hours you'd have the law? Guess why? The night before, I read the first 10 pages of Plato's Law. I drew on my 32 years of neurosurgery. I told Yusuf and his brother the story of Benjamin Rush and why medical tyranny was not placed in the US Constitution. I said, you have to fix this problem because that's the only way we're going to get people to understand that we need to protect our AI right there. We need our children to become like Fen, like David. We need people to be great again. I'm sick and tired of listening to the idiot in the United States talk about making America great again. In El Salvador, we want to make the misfits great again. That's really what we're building here. That's the story of culture. This is brain surgery without a scalpel. For those of you who can't see that slide, I'll tell you what it says. It's a graph that shows you the more artificial light we did, the fatter we get. I know that implicitly. That's the reason I'm dressed like a bum now. I'm a Bitcoin bum because 9 days ago I retired. So in 1 year, I won't look like this again because I won't be abusing myself under the lights that I did in the operating room. You can book that. So I talked about the horrible opening Olympics. Take a look at this picture. I put 5 tweets out, and I did this for Santiago. Santiago's talk was in Spanish yesterday, but I can't speak it that well, but I can understand pretty damn good. And I'm going to tell you, every picture that he showed about the future for El Salvador, I want all of you to notice that they were very plain buildings. Why is that the design trend? Some of you guys have been to my house. Yusef's been there. I live in Eva Hines' house. She's probably the best architect in El Salvador. She doesn't live there anymore. When I bought the house, I looked at it. It was built perfectly for me. It had no artwork in it. I said, makes total sense. Architects are now building houses because they know we need to be outside. That's why smaller is better. That's why open floor plans are better. Open windows are better. They don't even know why they're designing, because we're abusing technology so much that we need to be outside. That's the reason this building was chosen. I put 5 tweets out this morning that told you about the 2 guys that competed for this exposition. And the guy that was going to compete against Eiffel was an engineer, just so you guys know, not an artist, not an architect. He competed against one of the best stonemasons. Guess what the stonemason's temple was going to be called? The Tower of the Sun. And he got rejected, kind of like you, Fen. And guess what? I posted all the talks of the people in the salons in Paris when they saw this design. They hated it. But guess what? Today, we think the Eiffel Tower is great. Well, I personally still think it sucks. Always have. Now I'm trying to tell you why. We need to be a lot wiser about light. And I want to tell you just how early this story goes back. 5,000 years. Those pyramids used to be covered with gold. Anybody know why they were covered with gold? Gold was the perfect atomic reflector for red light. What's the most dominant part of sunlight? 43% red. So how today can I tell you I know that I'm right? How many people have seen King Tutankhamun's thing in a museum? Just raise your hand. You know that he had osteoporosis, he was falling apart. Why? Because all the elites lived inside. Do you know the guys that built up pyramids? Dark guys like people from Kenya, called the Anubians. We found their bones. Perfect skeletons, perfect shaped skulls, perfect teeth. This, the Sphinx, 28th latitude in Giza, looks to the east, all 4 extremities down on the ground. Dave, how much that cost? Not too much, huh, Dave? Okay. Just realize this. We are creatures of light. Genesis was right. The evolutionists were really wrong. The Big Bang, maybe. We needed to have light. Light is germane to our story. The POMC gene, propionmelanocortin, is the key to understanding this mystery. It only gets translated by UV light. So when you think the sun is bad for you, remember this talk. If you want to be more creative, I told Fen this already. Want to be a better artist? Davis, you want to be a better writer? Any of you guys in here. Andrew, come further south. Texas is big, but it's not got enough sun. You need to get the sun. Why do I think, unlike Curtis Yarvin, who you just heard speak, he's right. The people of El Salvador are the greatest asset, but we need to turn them loose in the light. We need to turn them into little savages. Not the savages in Seacot, the savages here that understand what decentralized medicine is all about. Optimizing light, water, and magnetism. It's not just a story for the elites, it's a story for everybody. Thank you.